in Baltimore and the Maple Leafs, and of course the Orioles taking on the Reds all week and get back home this weekend as well. And we've got basketball with the Wizards, and of course the NFL draft a week away. We've got the NFL schedule about to happen as well. This guy does all things NFL Network. He's flying back and forth from his palatial estate in New Jersey out to Los Angeles as a part of the NFL Network team. He's watched more film than ever. He is ready for this draft. And Brian Baldinger, it is always a pleasure to get together with you and talk some football, especially on the eve of a draft. And have you ever been as prepared for a draft as you are this year? I feel like you're really fired up about this one.
You know what, Nancy? It's a good question. I kind of feel like I am. I mean, I always feel pretty prepared, but for whatever reason, I just went deeper this year. I feel because
I see that. I mean, I really do. I mean, you're bragging about it on social every day. It's awesome.
But it's a great observation, Nancy. But I think, I mean, I kind of just cross-pollinate with a lot of guys in the industry, and we all feel like this is the deepest defensive draft we can ever remember. And so just when you think, well, I've looked at all the corners, there's another one. And just when you think you've looked at all the pass rushers, there's another one. And they just keep coming. And so you just keep scratching and you're going, wow, that guy's played 38 straight games in a row, and that guy looks like he's, can flip his hips, and that guy looks like he knows how to tackle, and you just keep going, and I mean, I'm still going. And so I think it's the most I've ever done. I mean, I'm not in Mike Mayock's category or anything like that. I'm not trying to do any of that, but I feel like I've got a good command of 200, 250 guys that could get drafted, a week from Thursday.
Is it easier or more difficult to do? I mean, you were a dude that you moved to Cherry Hill to be near NFL films. You legendarily, back in our era when we were doing the Monster Mondays, had a key to the building. Literally, Steve Sable gave you a key to the building. Now, I think the modern era, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but over the last 6-8 weeks, it feels like Patrick Mahomes has sat with every broadcaster in America trying to show himself to be a quarterback. I mean, how the deep dive that the networks do, that the football sites do, and the access to players and tape and opinions, it's more out there than it's ever been. And I don't mean running wind sprints at the combine. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, like, trying to get a deeper dive into who these players are. It really can be like sort of paralysis by analysis, right?
Well, people are definitely guilty of that. I'm a big fan of Patrick Mahomes. I did a lot of his games at Texas Tech, doing the Big 12 games for Fox, Nasty. But everybody's looking for content, and in this 24-hour news cycle, the college draft is a big deal. I mean, they'll roll out the red carpet now. I mean, we all can remember when this thing was done on radio. I was with Mel Kiper a couple of weeks ago doing an event, and Mel was the draft. Like, he was the only guy that was talking about it. I mean, he was running a popping, son and pop shop, right out of his house with his dad, and like he was the only guy. Now it's it's big business, and they're filling up magazines and airtime and television programs. We've had a ton of guys that come through the NFL Network, Nasty, out in L.A. over the last few weeks. I just met Zach Banner from USC and Hassan Reddick. I mean, they've all been coming through, so you get a chance to meet these kids, kind of get to know them a little bit more. But I think they are out there. They're doing the radio shows and doing the PR and showing up and trying to prove the past. Their stock in the draft, and I think some of it is influenced by how much you see them and what you hear from them.
Who do you love, Baldy? Give me a couple of players here, and we'll get into the Ravens at 16, and I've been talking about this for months, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it through next week leading up to the draft. And, I've seen the Ravens be mocked wide receivers. I've seen them mock tight ends, and if an O.J. Howard were to drop, I would be shocked if they go offense, but I know you being a former offensive lineman, you'd have no problem with them taking a right tackle at 16 as well, right?
No, I mean, if you wanted Ryan Ramczyk at 16, I mean, I think you play right tackle for the next decade from Wisconsin. And I think there's some guys that Cam Robinson from Alabama can probably play right tackle for the next decade. He might have 2 penalties in the next 10 years and probably won't know, many people will spot him, and, well, maybe some people will spot him. You will. But a lot of guys, could just be unnoticed almost. In some ways, Martian Yanda is maybe the best player on the Ravens, and maybe the most unnoticed outside of Joe Flacco. So sometimes you get in that kind of position. But, guys that I love I love Dalvin Cook. I mean, I know people talk about the running backs in this draft, and everybody knows their names by now, Fournette and McCaffrey and Mixon and Kamara. I mean, they all know their names, but I don't think that Dalvin Cook has a parallel in this thing. You know, I love him. I love Reuben Foster at Alabama. I know Mosley at Baltimore has been a really good player for the last 4 years. I don't think there's any comparison between Reuben Foster and Mosley. I think he's just faster and hits harder, and I think he's an amazing player. And I mean, there's just the safeties. Malik Hooker, Jamal Adams are phenomenal players. I mean, just already so far ahead of the game, you know, and how they play the game and what they see and what they're asked to do.
By the way, I'm seeing Jamal Adams mocked as high as 2 or 3. I never thought I'd live the day to see a safety, not even Ed Reed reincarnated or Troy Polamalu or John Lynch taken that high up. I mean, the safety position has changed since you played the game, right, Baldy?
Well, let me ask you, I mean, how many safeties have the Ravens gone through, Nancy? And just say since the Super Bowl year.
Fair enough.
I mean, there's, but that's everybody's trying to find them, you know. And so you really, you know, whether it's Tony Jefferson now or Eric Weddle, I mean, you guys going through free agency to try to find guys that can play the position, that can actually stay on the field and play it. It's been hard to draft. Now, the guys you just mentioned, you know, Jamal Adams as high as 3, Malik Hooker, these guys, they can cover, they can hit, they can blitz, they can play center field. They love the game. You know, I mean, they look like they can't miss. Of course, you never want to say that you know, that term, can't miss, but they look like they're going to be really good players for a long time. And I can see it. I mean, everybody's looking for safeties, and why not? Why not try to get one of these guys that can do it all and try to fix the back end of your defense? I mean, you just saw what the Ravens did in free agency 2 years in a row, trying to fix the back end of their defense. It's really important.
Brian Baldinger joining us here. You can follow his journey out on Twitter, and tens of thousands do, at Baldy NFL. If you like him a lot, he's even more fun on Facebook, but that's the privilege I have of being friends with Baldy for 2 decades. So for the Ravens at 16, I know you've thrown some names around there, but on a specific need basis, Baldy, I've spent the last probably 6 months, 5 months, whatever it's been, since Jimmy Smith went sideways and Doomerville couldn't get on the field, and Suggs is playing the edge, and they're waiting on Judon and Zadarius Smith to chase the quarterback around. It felt to me at the end of the season like, dude, they need a corner and they need somebody to get after the quarterback. And I know we've lost Ricky Wagner. I know the center position is sort of up in the air, and we'll find out what happens with Mangold. And I know you'd like to have more skill possession receivers and running backs around Joe Flacco. But it really felt to me like for months it was going to be a rush edge or it was going to be a quarterback, because all the draft people like yourself say this is a defensive deep draft. So therefore at 16 they would go that direction. Maybe it's the exact opposite, though, Baldy. Maybe they would go after a tackle or a wide receiver or a running back in the first round, knowing that on that 48th pick or the 74th or the 78th that they've now dealt up with your friends up in Philadelphia to pick up, that they could get defensive players second, third round, and maybe there's more deep depth there. But I am very intrigued by this draft for the Ravens, because not making the playoffs 3 out of 4 years, Ozzy's been on a little bit of a losing run here at the casino the last couple of years with the Matt Elams and the Brashard Perrymans, that they haven't been able to get that franchise-defining guy. I don't know that they're going to get that guy at 16, but they better go get a hell of a football player somewhere along the line here.
Well, I agree. They need a game-changing player. Now, at 16, I mean, it all depends on what goes on in the first 15, and we've certainly seen Ozzie move up before to go after a guy if they want a guy. I mean, Joe Flacco, I mean, whatever it is, they've gone after guys. So if they have their eyes set on somebody and he's dropping, I could see the Ravens making a move. Now, there's a couple guys there. You mentioned pass rusher. I mean, if Derek Barnett is there from Tennessee, you don't know how long Suggs can keep going. But this is a guy that can plug in a 4-3 defense, play right in, I think, right away. I mean, I think he can play left side or right side. If you want to play him opposite Suggs, I think you can do it. He's done it for 3 years at a high level in the SEC. He broke Reggie White's pass rush record with 33 sacks. And it's not just empty sacks. This guy has moves. He's an advanced pass rusher. He's you forget about the 40-yard dash. It's meaningless. He's got a really quick, explosive first two steps. He knows how to turn the corner. I think he's going to be a good player. I mean, if he's there at 16, I think it really goes to some of the Ravens' needs. And if you look at what the Ravens have done over the years, they like building in the trenches. He would fit in that mode. Heck, if Reuben Foster was there and you put him next to Mosley, why wouldn't you just clean up from the inside? Now, typically they don't like to spend too heavily like that at inside linebacker, so I don't think that will get done. But Mike Williams at Clemson, Nasty, if he's there at 16, look, I don't care what the Ravens' record is at drafting wide receivers. We know it's not the greatest. But this Mike Williams, man, you watch him in these championship games at Clemson 2 years in a row. I mean, well, he didn't play 2 years, but this year, I mean, the 9 catches against Alabama, he had a sensational season. And he is a kid that has an unusual ability to jump equally well off either foot. I mean, when he attacks a football in the air now, there's nobody getting the ball away from him. He can just go get it. And sometimes I feel like they just have never done enough to surround Joe Flacco the way they have done it with Peyton Manning or Drew Brees. They just haven't surrounded them with elite players over the years. And I just think Joe deserves that. Mike Williams might fit that mode.
Well, Baldy, for all of the hubbub, the Perryman thing, we're 2 years into this, and I know the organization is still talking about him in some sort of active tone, as though, he can still blossom. Are you a believer in that? A couple of years into this, that a wide receiver is going to go out this year and be that first-round draft pick guy that's going to catch 70 or 80 balls and become an impact guy at this point? He certainly has the speed to do that.
Well, we haven't seen him do it. I mean, he has had the injuries, and so, he's been on the shelf a lot. And, look, some guys, they come in injured, they stay injured. I don't know what's going to happen to Bashard, but I just know that you can't sit around and wait. Like, you need, if you're looking at winning the division and competing with Pittsburgh and maybe a bounce back from Cincinnati, you're going to have to score more points than that they've scored. And they've got to be more explosive in the passing game. They haven't had anybody since, a really good season of Torrey Smith and a good year of Steve Smith that could just get down the field and get over the top. And you just got to take advantage of Joe's arm. I mean, he's made to do it. When you won the Super Bowl, you went to Denver and he put the 70-yard pass down the field to beat Denver. I mean, I just think there's days when he could just throw the ball over the top. And he just hasn't really had that guy, except for a little bit of Steve Smith, to really do that with. And sometimes sometimes 3-play drives are a whole lot better than 12-play drives. And you got to give Joe that opportunity to do that with a guy, and I think Mike Williams fits that mode.
Baldy, how many quarterbacks are going to be off at 16? I think that is that's part of this thing, and who would be available. And we all know Ozzy's never immune to dealing backwards, and I don't know that there's a lot of guys that he would deal up into 10, 11, 12 and go giving away one of those picks further back that he's acquired. But the quarterback thing always dictates this first round of the draft. And I've heard so much about Deshaun Watson. Now we're hearing about Trubisky to Cleveland. As we inch up on the draft, it always feels like the quarterbacks always move themselves up the board, even when it's a relatively pedestrian group, as apparently this is.
Well, you got to be careful. I mean, we've seen the mistakes that have been made. Christian Ponder. We've seen Curtis Payne. I mean, we've seen these guys overdrafted, and I don't think anybody's taking any of these quarterbacks number one. I mean, I don't think Cleveland. I think whatever Cleveland wants to put out there for the rest of the world to chew on right now, they're going to do it. But I don't think they feel Mitchell Trubisky is worthy of a first pick. I certainly don't. I don't know how anybody could actually put him above Deshaun Watson. That's just me. 1 year of playing quarterback at North Carolina and an 8-5 year, some up and down games, isn't worthy of being the first round pick.
Spoken like a true Duke guy, by the way. I just want to point that out. I just want to say that, Baldy.
That's good. And look, look, the quarterbacks are always a story in any draft, whether they get taken, don't get taken. We always look for it. What team, Arizona, New Orleans, what team starts preparing for their aging quarterback with one of these quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, one of those guys where he could back up Drew Brees, or he could back up Carson Palmer and 2 years from now, be ready. Like, that's going to be a story if that happens. Who goes first, Trubisky or Watson? I think that's kind of where it's at right now. So I really don't see any team taking a quarterback. The Jets at 6. I don't see any team taking a quarterback until Cleveland takes one at 12. If they're doing it, then they're overdrafting these guys and they're drafting purely for need. And they're going to bypass some really good players in order to take a chance on a player that's really difficult to develop. I mean, Joe Flacco got a chance in 2008, Matt Ryan in 2008, because, Joe had 2 injuries in front of him and an illness that didn't give him the job, but it made it easier for him to start day one as a rookie. And he had a championship-level defense, and, Joe's career took off. But it's difficult to develop these quarterbacks if they're not playing, that's for sure.
He is Brian Baldinger. He is Baldy NFL out on Twitter, and tens of thousands do follow him. You can also follow him out at the NFL Network, where he's going to be working his buns off here the next couple of weeks, getting up on the draft. And, Baldy, we talked about the safety position and about the defense and the depth in general, but on the offensive side, there's only one tight end, and, a tight end from Alabama. I mean, a guy after Ozzy's heart. You talk about an impact player on the offensive side. Boy, O.J. Howard's a guy's name that I've seen bandied about. I've seen him drop as far as 16, but it feels like in the framework of some of these offenses, having that kind of guy, a difference maker, a Gronkowski kind of guy, that he'll be gone by the time 16 rolls around, correct?
It just, it sort of depends if these quarterbacks get taken and who's, is there a run on safeties? Does Jamal Adams and Malik Hooker go, and then does somebody go Jabril Peppers? And there's an early run. Sometimes the run on a position starts, and all of a sudden somebody that might have been thinking about a tight end goes, boy, I better get this safety now. I'm not going to get it. Or a player that they wanted. And sometimes a guy like O.J. Howard could last to 16. But he's certainly a guy that I even look at Philadelphia at 14 as a guy that if you wanted to build around Carson Wentz and you just keep adding weapons, he's a guy I would look at. I don't care about Zach Ertz or anybody else. Like, this guy is a better player and a better prospect. And you have seen in Baltimore what tight ends can do when, they're really actively part of the offense and how they dominate in the red zone and third downs and how important they are. And obviously, Ozzy's connections to Alabama will always be there. And, he's going to get that scout report, the true scout report, as well as anybody can out of that school and from that program. And so I'm sure he's done all of his diligence on O.J. Howard, and he may have his fingers crossed. And that might be the one guy that Baltimore looks at if he gets past, number 11 or number 12. Would that be a guy that Baltimore would consider, throwing an extra pick in there, swapping picks, whatever, to go get a player like that? He could very much be in play.
Paul, are you worried about the Ravens? I mean, I know you've had a long relationship with John. I know you're respective for Ozzy and Eric and everything that's going on around here. I think there's a real sense for the first time. And look, Baldy, I've been doing this, from the very beginning. You know that. I've known you most of this time. I have never sat around here in an off season. Certainly not even the year Billick got fired, because it happened sort of wildcat. I mean, we didn't sit around here and speculate so much about Brian Billick's job 9 months after he had the team 13-3. We haven't had that going on here. And I know maybe in Philadelphia they've done it a couple of times up there, but the whole notion that there could be a reset button here in a franchise where they've never ever picked a football player, going back to John Ogden in 1996, that didn't have Ozzie Newsome, Phil Savage, or Eric DeCosta, George Kokinas, that brain trust wasn't a part of that, and going back to Brian Billick from almost the very beginning and John Harbaugh, that if they put up a 6-10 this year and things get off the rail, we could be talking about a regime change around here in a way that we've never really discussed that before. Does that appear in the headlights for people around the league, you think?
I don't think anybody wants to say that because of the respect that they have for Ozzy and for John, and for Steve, as an owner. I mean, I think there's a deep-rooted respect for how they do their business and how they handle themselves. And so I don't think anybody will say that right now, But look, if 6-10 is the finished record this year, and you don't make the playoffs for 4 out of 5 years in 3 straight years, then of course that's going to be sounded, and nobody would be alarmed by that in Baltimore because it doesn't matter what your name is. It's all about winning and what have you done for me lately. And so,
Well, it does. Baldy, it just feels like a lot's going to have to change between now and September for them to win 11 or 12 games. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like an 11 or. And I know we're not far away, but the draft is really, really important. They got to get a couple of players here. Something's got to happen. I mean, they need better football players. That's pretty clear, I think.
Yeah, look. I was just taking a guy last year, Kamalea Correa. Now, does he have a bounce back year this year? I mean, he was a high pick, and they got nothing out of him. I mean, they got they had all those picks last year, and who really contributed. So sometimes you make your greatest jump, in that 1 year between your first and second year, and maybe we'll see some of these guys with the mercurial leap. But like week 15 last year or week 16, nasty, they were at the big ketchup bottle, and Pittsburgh's 9-5, and Baltimore's 8-6, and Antonio Brown is stopped at the goal line and stretches that ball out. If he doesn't get that over and Baltimore wins, there's a two-way tie for first place going to week 17. Maybe it's different against Cincinnati. Are we talking about a 1 yard difference between Pittsburgh and Baltimore? Like, I know Pittsburgh has won playoff games each of the last 2 years, and Baltimore hasn't seen the playoffs, so that's maybe not fair, but they're 1 yard away from being tied going to week 17. So it can be pretty tight. And they got the best kicker in the league. He had a great season last year. I think Flacco needs more help. This offensive line is a question. Ever since they let Kelechi Osemele walk, it feels like they went from having the best offensive line in football to being a middle of the pack. And now they changed the offensive line coaches and this year, and so Wagner's gone, and we got to see. Like, they got to put this, they got to put this thing together. It starts there, and I don't know. It looks to me like they need a right tackle. Nasty, and this is not a good draft for offensive linemen. You get past the third round, it'll be hard to find offensive linemen in this draft.
He is Brian Baldinger. Baldy NFL is the way to find him. And last thing for you, it feels like Pittsburgh's always sort of improving, and I know the incredible outpouring of love for Dan Rooney up there in Pittsburgh. But I look at Cleveland and I say they'll screw the draft up. They usually do, and how much better could they be? But boy, Cincinnati, this feels like they're driving this thing to the end of the curb with Marvin this year. I don't know how they're going to pick themselves up. Boy, they've just had a drain of talent and age going on in Cincinnati. I don't know how they're going to win 8 or 9 games this year.
Well, they have, typically done it through the draft. And so their number one draft pick, Torres Peck in preseason, William Jackson III, Marvin told me he's the best rookie corner he's ever seen. Now, he'll be back this year. They lost Tyler Eifert for the first 3 months of the season. Now, he's a difference maker in this whole league. He breaks his ankle at the Pro Bowl. He can't come back. That was a difficult injury. You put Eifert back in that lineup with A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd gets the second year and you draft a guy. I can see this team bouncing back. They always draft for what they're going to lose. They figured they were going to lose Whitworth at some point, either to free agency or to retirement. They lost him to free agency. So, Cedric Ogbuehi, he was a first-round pick. They have drafted for guys that they're going to lose. And so Gio Bernard will come back, and Jeremy Hill is there. And I feel like Cincinnati can bounce back. It was a dreadful season on both sides of the ball last year. But I would not write that team off. I think that they're slowly restocking in a good draft from them this year. I think they can get back in the hunt.
Baldy, I know you've watched more film than anybody. Give me a player that's not a first-round player that you're in love with. Give me a guy that's going to show up in day 2 or day 3, somewhere in there. Pick 60, 80, 90, wherever it's going to be. Give me a player that's going to be a good player.
I'll give you a player, Nat.
Give me a player
that you should look for. That if I was a Raven official, I'd be Curtis Samuel out of Ohio State.
Okay.
He's a running back / slot receiver. He might be the best route runner in the whole draft. He runs a 4.3 140. He scored 15 touchdowns for Ohio State last year. He's compact, unbelievably explosive. Loves the game. He's from Brooklyn, New York. He's going to go in the second round, and I'm just telling you, I'll give you a description. He is a point scorer. He is a guy that is just flat out going to find the end zone and move sticks for you. for anybody in that second round. And, what's his position? Wherever he's at, man. He could play in the slot, tailback. He could kind of do it all. He's a special player.
Well, good. There, see that. I'm going to hold you to that. 3 years from now, I'm going to come back when he's wearing a grass skirt wherever they're playing the Pro Bowl, and I'll say Baldy told me that back in April of 17.
Well, I know that you have that kind of recall button, Nasty, so I would expect that from you.
Well, memory like an elephant. Baldy, love you, appreciate you. We're following you out of Baldy NFL and watching your work out at NFL Network. It's good to have you back in the cockpit and doing what your creator wanted you to do, which is talk football, of course, and go to U2 concerts. You fired up about any summer tours here? You're going to be checking out U2, Tom Petty? Anything good going on?
I got to see. I have not seen U2 since I think I saw him in Dusseldorf, Germany, Nasty, in 2006.
Okay, it's been a little while.
So it's been over 10 years.
There's a Joshua tree now, Baldy. You got to be ready for a little Bullet to Blue Sky, Running to Stand Still, Red Hill Mining Town. I'm ready for this.
I can sing it word for word, Nasty. Joshua Tree, I do it word for word.
All right, bro. Vancouver, Seattle. Come on, get on a train with me.
All right.
Let's go do this. They're playing in Philly. You and I are.
Text me the schedule. I'll come meet you in Vancouver.
We're ready. I'm ready for any kind of action with Bono and the boys this summer. Baldy, always a pleasure, man. Thanks for joining us, and keep up the great work. We're also following you up there in Philadelphia, 97.5 The Fanatic. I got to give a plug to my buddy Matt Hagan up there for you, all right?
All right.
Be well.
Thanks, Esther.
There he goes, Brian Baldinger, our friend and lifer. He's stuck with me, and I'm stuck with him for better or for worse. It's kind of like we're married just through sports radio from our NFL Monster Monday vault dives up there at NFL Films at Cherry Hill at Exit 4. The good old days, as they say. But Baldy's on NFL Network. You can check him out. You can find me in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you are. I'm in Toronto all week. Caps, Maple Leafs. Yes, I'm still a believer. Yes, I was awake for the double overtime loss on Saturday night. I'm not dismayed. No one's going to get me down on the Caps this year. You're not down until you're out, and they're not out, they're in. I'm in Toronto. We'll be there all week. Orioles in Cincinnati, we're monitoring all that. Luke will be on all that, and of course the Wizards, as well as the NFL Draft. Our trips are on sale for London. We're waiting on Green Bay, Minnesota, Nashville, as well as the Raiders, all that coming later on this week, right there on the NFL Network, and we'll get those trips on sale the minute we can. The Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. It is still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. I am a very available individual, like a certain sports owner. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.